Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Armpit Intellectuals. I'm Zara, and as always, I'm joined by my co host Bilal.
Today's topic is one that stirs up a lot of debate and emotion: nationalism in Pakistan. What does it mean for a country often described as a nation of nations? How has the interplay of culture, politics, and identity shaped Pakistan's journey? And where does that leave us today?
It's a loaded question. Nationalism in Pakistan has always been contentious. For many, it's seen as a threat, a tool used by so called backwards or uneducated groups to undermine societal cohesion. But is that the full story, Bilal?
Nationalist movements in Pakistan are more than just political slogans or regional grievances. They're deeply rooted in history, identity, and the aspirations of the people. Yet the state often treats nationalism as something to be feared or suppressed, rather than something to understand or incorporate.
And this isn't a uniquely Pakistani dilemma. Around the world, countries have grappled with balancing national unity and regional diversity. Quebec in Canada, Catalonia in Spain, and Belgium's Flemish and French speaking communities are just a few examples.
Take Quebec, for instance. The province held referendums in 1980 and 1995 to decide whether it wanted to remain part of Canada. In both cases, the people ultimately chose to stay, not because they were coerced, but because their identity and agency were respected within a democratic framework.
When space is created for different identities to coexist, unity doesn't have to mean uniformity. Unfortunately, Pakistan has often taken the opposite approach, centralizing power at the expense of regional diversity.
And that brings us to figures like Abdul Ghaffar Khan, also known as Bacha Khan, one of the most fascinating and significant leaders in South Asian history. His life and work embody the tension between nationalism as an assertion of identity and the state's resistance to it.
Bacha Khan, famously called the frontier Gandhi, championed nonviolent resistance during British rule. Born in 1890 in Utmanzai, his philosophy was deeply rooted in Pashtun traditions, especially Pashtunwali, which emphasizes justice, hospitality, and honor. As quoted in Eknath Eswaran's Nonviolent Soldier of Islam, Bacha Khan said, "Is not the Pashtun amenable to love and reason? He will go with you to hell if you can win his heart, but you cannot force him even to go to heaven."
What set Bacha Khan apart was his focus on education and social reform. Through the Azad schools he founded in Northwest Frontier Province, now Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, he sought to empower communities with free, progressive education that went beyond literacy to foster self reliance and collective responsibility.
His Khudai Khidmatgar, servants of God, translates to servants of God, movement mobilized thousands of Pashtuns in a non-violent campaign against British colonialism. While non-violence often faces criticism as an idealistic strategy, Bacha Khan's fusion of Gandhian principles with Pashtun cultural values proved it could be both practical and deeply resonant.
However, his vision extended beyond the British departure. Bacha Khan advocated for a decentralized, federated India where regional autonomy was respected. But partition changed the course of his aspirations. Forced to choose between India and Pakistan, he reluctantly aligned with Pakistan.
And that's when his troubles with the state began. Bacha Khan quietly and, well, quickly, actually, not quietly, became disillusioned with Pakistan's centralizing tendencies. He advocated for a federated system that honored the autonomy of Pashtuns and other ethnic groups, but the state viewed this as a threat.
Bacha Khan faced repeated imprisonment even under the regimes of Ayub Khan and Ziaul Haq. Despite his lifelong commitment to non-violence, he was often labeled a heretic and traitor.
And his story illustrates how nationalism, when misunderstood or suppressed, can fracture a society. And his case isn't isolated. Consider Balochistan, a province with a long history of grievances against the state.
Well, it starts with the annexation of Kalat in 1948. While Kalat's leadership had been promised autonomy, those promises were quickly rescinded, sparking an insurgency that has continued in various forms ever since.
The 2006 assassination of Nawab Akbar Bukti marked a turning point. The nationalist movement in Balochistan transitioned from being led by tribal sardars to a more grassroots resistance. Activists like Mehrang Baloch have emerged, symbolizing a new wave of activism driven by the middle class.
Sindh has its own story of enfranchisement. G.M. Sayyid, a founding member of the Muslim League, later became a vocal critic of Pakistan's trajectory. He argued that Sindh's resources should benefit its people rather than being exploited by the center.
And despite his extensive writings, over 60 books, on Sindhi rights and autonomy, G.M. Sayyid faced relentless persecution. Like Bacha Khan, his nationalism was about dignity and equity, not division.
Meanwhile, Punjab, as the dominant province, has historically had a complex relationship with nationalism. Its centrality to Pakistan's political, economic, and military power has often masked the region's internal struggles with identity and culture.
And despite Punjab's dominance in national politics as well, Punjabi nationalism has largely been suppressed or sidelined in favor of a broader Islamic or Pakistani identity.
Mhm.
This suppression stems partly from the post partition era, when Urdu was promoted as a national language. We know how that went.
Mm.
Sidelining regional languages like Punjabi and at the time, Bengali. While many Punjabis speak the language at home, it has been absent from the formal education system and marginalized in official discourse. But, it's still the most widely spoken language, in
Yeah,
fact.
it is. It is. And it's good that you mentioned Bangla because that later on, I mean, Qaid Azam's speech in Bangladesh or East Pakistan actually became the root reason, I can say it, where the Bangladeshi nationalism started and where the Bangladesh movement so called started, where he came up and said in English that, the national language of this country would be Urdu. And that's just very, you can say, oxymoronic that, like you say something in a totally different language to a crowd who doesn't understand that language, saying that another third language would be your national language. So
let me make it very clear to you, leave no doubt that the state language of Pakistan is going to be Urdu and no other language. And anyone who tries to mislead you is really the enemy of Pakistan. Without state language, no nation can remain tied up solidly together and work together. Look at the history. Every government has got to have some state language. Now therefore, so far as the state language is concerned, Pakistan's state language shall be Urdu.
It's almost like a power move.
yes, it is. Uh, so going back to Punjab, although Punjabi is the mother tongue of over 48% of Pakistan's population,
I thought it was higher, but I could be wrong.
yeah, it could be higher.
Yeah, but let's say it's roughly half of the entire population's mother tongue, right?
Yeah, I would say maybe it's around 60%.
Yeah.
Historically, it was the language of poets like Bulleh Shah, Waris Shah, and Shah Hussain, whose works emphasize themes of spirituality, love, and rebellion against oppressive structures. Live, if I may live. These literary giants remain symbols of a rich culture, heritage, yet the language and the identity they represent have been pushed to the periphery.
And one reason for this marginalization is Punjab's association with power. As the province that houses the federal capital, controls a significant portion of the military leadership, and dominates the bureaucracy, Punjab has often been perceived as benefiting disproportionately from the state's resources. This perception has led to resentment from smaller provinces, framing Punjab, rightfully so, as the oppressor.
But this narrative overlooks the internal complexities of Punjabi identity. For example, within Punjab itself, there's a sharp rural urban divide.
That's true. North and South Punjab mein hai.
Yeah, for sure. The rural heartland where traditional Punjabi culture thrives often feels disconnected from the urban elite, who are more inclined to adopt Urdu or English as markers of modernity and upward mobility.
The 1970s actually saw a brief surge in Punjabi nationalism, driven by cultural movements seeking to reclaim the province's literary and historical heritage. Organizations like the Punjabi Adabi Board and festivals celebrating Sufi poetry became platforms for promoting Punjabi culture. However, these efforts largely remained cultural rather than political, failing to gain traction in broader nationalist discourse.
The lack of political representation for Punjabi nationalism is also notable. Unlike Sindh or Balochistan, Punjab has never had a strong political movement advocating for regional autonomy or cultural preservation. Well, if they would have done that, I think there wouldn't be like idea of Pakistan. Like if they also went along with nationalists, like then they were shit. Like
They
the
just have a
center
bunch of separate,
states, yeah, exactly. There wouldn't be no. And also the one unit, the whole idea of one unit thing, I guess, came from the center as well. Right?
Mhm.
So somebody had to like really hold on to those ideas.
Apparently.
So this absence, I guess, stems partly from the fact that Punjabi elites are deeply embedded in Pakistan's centralized power structures.
As we know, like army mein zyada salt range there,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Yeah,
or
Potawari belt.
high belt, yes.
Promoting a distinct Punjabi identity might challenge the very system that sustains their influence.
Yes, well, in recent years, there has been a quiet revival of interest in Punjabi identity, you know, Basuri, particularly among younger generations. Social media platforms have given a new voice to Punjabi poets, musicians, and activists who are reclaiming the language and celebrating the province's unique cultural legacy. And I think this applies to across the border as well, like Punjabi music, Punjabi rap,
Yeah.
it's becoming.
Punjabi ko chalega pahunch gaye ne.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's very true. Yeah, that's very true. So groups advocating for the inclusion of Punjabi in the education system argue that
The Musia.
step this step is essential not
R.I.P.
just for preserving the language but also for fostering a sense of pride and belonging among Punjabi speakers. I mean, yeah. So, I mean, if we are talking about like across the border, like in India, like they have somewhat developed this identity, and they haven't sort of forced Hindi on people. That's why I think, like this idea of Urda Punjab, and like they have really like ingrained this idea of Punjab and Punjabi and speaking the language. Like even if we see that everywhere, like in Canada, everywhere they still speak those languages, but like Punjabi people from Pakistani side don't do that. They rather speak Urdu rather than Punjabi themselves. So I think that idea, I mean, I'm not saying that India is very good, but I think that this particular idea of just like letting all the languages be the whatever the national languages of that place, whatever that place is. I mean, just see the divide in like northern and southern India, right? Like a lot of people from South India don't even speak Hindi. Like, they just speak whatever Malayalam and English. Like, they don't even understand the in middle part that is Hindi, but I guess there is also that concept that, like, if you don't speak Hindi, you're not like considered to be a very refined person, or like, stuff, but like a total person, the total Indian, I guess, or total like Bharti ke Hindi nahi bolna aati hai.
Yeah, and I think Hindi is also mostly associated with North India, right? Which
Correct,
is
yeah.
already kind of like the oppressor. So,
Yeah, you can say that.
I mean, and not the, I mean, yeah, the oppressor in the sense that it's the dominant culture of India.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Also, research has shown that the mother tongue education improves learning outcomes and strengthens cultural identity, a fact recognized globally but often ignored in Pakistan. I mean, this is so true because the thing is that, I mean, I always hear Parvez Hoodboy saying this, that, like, people, like students who are basically, like in Pakistan, are like, if they are in rural areas or like areas where different languages are being spoken, are getting confused in school because at home they're speaking a different language, at the streets they're speaking a different language, and in school they're being taught in a different language. So if and they are literally confused as to which language should they pick, and they cannot get grasp, like have a certain, like you can say, command over a certain language. And if they are not, like, taught in a certain language, they don't understand the concepts fully. And it's very true that if something is taught to you in your mother tongue, you get that thing really well, rather than just something which is, like, totally different, like, you don't even understand, or you're trying to learn English at the same time in English class, and at the same time you're also learning science in English, where you haven't learned English and you're learning science in English. So it's a very two-faced sword, I would say, for the kids there.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, I think that's, yeah, a really important point. I think that, I mean, as yourself, right, as a Sindhi speaker, as a Sindhi.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that, yeah, for sure. Like, but I would say that uh, even in my household, like, I was first taught to speak Urdu, then Sindhi, right? For me, like, it was it was after some time, like, I was maybe like in eighth or ninth grade when I started to understand that I have to learn this language as well, because this is something that is, like, my parents used to speak Sindhi with themselves, but they didn't speak Sindhi with their kids. So it kind of also, this thing kind of brought this sort of like conflict, I would say, in my mind, as to, like, in my household, I see my mom and dad speaking a different language, but they're speaking with me a different language. And then I have to go to school and I speak a totally different language, or like get or learn in a different language. So, but like at the same time, I mean, again, like, our or my idea is not to discriminate against any language. Like, I don't discriminate against Urdu, I don't discriminate against Punjabi or even English. Like, it's just a language, and at the end of the day, you learn it to just basically, like, even to sharpen your mind in some way. So yeah, I would say that though I was like, there was Sindhi going on in my household, in my school, or for me, my first language was Urdu still.
Mm.
So, but it was in English, of course. So I did have that issue. Like, when I came to university, started university in an English speaking country, for me it was still a struggle to understand that kind of English, because even though I was going in English medium schools, sometimes they would, like, make us understand concepts in Urdu, and that would help us more understand the concept rather than understanding it in English. So yeah, I think that's how my journey was. through these three different languages.
Yeah, wow, that's really amazing. And I think also, do you think, the fact that because Sindhi is, a minority language
Mm-hmm.
and there's a sense of Sindhi nationalism, right?
Mm-hmm.
That kind of prompts like Sindhis to speak Sindhi more to kind of maintain its cultural um importance.
No, I mean, I wouldn't say that that's they think. So they might think themselves that the things are like they're being oppressed by the center. That's a different debate. But for the language itself, like there has been a lot of like it's just not the 70-year history, right? Like Sindhi has a very long history, and it has different like different poets, different writers, and itself there has been a lot of literature in Sindhi itself. So the people like even before partition or even before Pakistan was there, Sindh was itself like an autonomous state. Apart when not for the time when it was in the Bombay presidency. Even then they wanted to be separate when they were in the Bombay presidency. So I would say just that rich culture. I don't think that richness in the culture like allows them to speak that language. I mean, I know that before partition, like when British were trying to, British had annexed Sindh, and they were like they had, they wanted to they were doing sort of, you can say, bureaucratic work in Sindh. Um, they themselves had to sort of learn Sindhi to so that they can communicate with people properly. So like this is a very like you can say a great example where we can see that the Britishers themselves were opting to speak Sindhi in offices rather than speaking anything else because they knew that they have to learn this language in order to interact with people and to make them feel like we are not rulers and we are like someone who are here to better you in a way. So this was also new knowledge for me that I didn't know that this was happening. But they were also the ones who were like, translating some stuff in from Sindhi to English. So they had to learn Sindhi as and like speak that language in offices.
Mm.
So I think that this whole history and the whole richness of the language and like it was more related to the area that themselves rather than them when rather after that when they became part of Pakistan, they thought that this is going to continue. Like Sindhi was taught in every school in Karachi, and now it's. I mean, in Karachi, I don't think there's a lot of schools that teach. I mean, Hyderabad they do, but in Karachi, I don't think that happens unless it's a it's a government school, and I think even that there you might have a choice to like take it or not, like. So I mean, they're learning Chinese in since I recently heard them they're gonna introduce Chinese as a like a core subject, which doesn't
Wow,
make sense.
that does not make sense at all.
So yeah, so I think that this just like it's the same thing with Bengali, right? Like they you cannot enforce on someone to speak a certain language. Like they have been speaking this language for hundreds of years, if not thousands. Like so. And if you can say that, like, Sindhi and Punjabi and Balochi and Pashto have roots, like thousands of years of roots. So, like, so you cannot, like, it's just not to, the minority thing only comes in when their rights are not given. The language is something that is very innate within them and which is what they just use to communicate. That's it.
Yeah, definitely. Wow. Thank you for sharing that. That was very insightful. Yeah, it's really interesting how I think, because class is such a contentious issue in Pakistan, right? And such a, I mean, the class divide is so stark.
Mhm.
And I think, yeah, it's very interesting what you're saying because as someone who, grew up in the capital, like, in a upper class Punjabi family, I actually did first learn Urdu,
Mhm.
but then I very quickly after learned English
Right.
and I never learned Punjabi. So I think, and I think that's a pretty common theme. Like there are a lot of people who are Punjabi who live and grow up in Lahore who are upper class and don't speak a lick of Punjabi.
True.
And it's honestly appalling given like, कि लाहौर में इतने सारे लोग हैं जो पंजाबी में बोलते हैं.
Yeah.
It's just like, don't you want to be a part of the social fabric, the linguistic
Yeah.
social fabric? I mean, I regret.
But I still know that when I've been to Lahore, like I've seen people speaking Punjabi like just on the streets and like just like that. Like
Very
you
common.
don't see that with Sindhi in Karachi. Like you cannot go to like a rickshaw wala and just start speaking Sindhi.
Do you
Yeah,
think there
doesn't
might be
happen.
because of the, the Muhajir population and
Yeah, you can say that. That is true. Yeah.
the influence of, Urdu?
Yeah, for sure. That's very true for that. Yeah, and you can also say that Karachi. I mean, you cannot do that because like the ratio, or you can say the percentage of Sindhi speaking people kept decreasing as other people started coming to Karachi. Like, I mean, Mahajas are one thing, but then there's also Pathans, and there's like literally every population in Karachi. There is Bengali people living there. Like, that like I got to know that after Dhaka and Chittagong or Choctogram, like Karachi has the biggest population of Bengali people.
Really?
Yeah,
After
after
Chattogram?
Chittagong and Dhaka, Choctogram and Dhaka. Yeah. So like, and they're also like just not. They don't have CNICs. Like they're not registered citizens, so they
It's
cannot
like
get.
non-refugees.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's like. And there are also some Tamil population living in Karachi as well, like a big, not a big, but like a like you can say a quarter where like where there's just like Tamil people living.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting. I know that there's also a Sri Lankan population. Then we have like more, the communities that go much further back, like the Shidi community.
Hmm.
And
Yeah, the Makrani people like from Liari, like they're like, I mean, to be fair, like the the original population on in Karachi was like Sindhi Hindus, like very of course Sindhi Hindus, and the Macheres, like the Kutch, like Kutchi people, and the people from like Balochistan, who were basically like fishermen. That's what the population of Karachi was, and I mean Hyderabad was a bigger city than Karachi. It was a it was the capital of Sindh. But then, like, I mean, over the years, of course, like Karachi just became this hub of like people that like start coming in, and it was a port city, so it just boomed from there.
yeah, that's very interesting. And I think just to add to class and Punjabi nationalism, which is now intertwined with broader questions of class and inequality. Farmers in southern Punjab, for instance, feel alienated from the policies crafted by the urban centric elite in Lahore. And movements like the Saraiki identity struggle highlight the internal diversity within Punjab itself. So, I mean, Punjab being the center and all that is very true, but within Punjab are these ethnic linguistic tensions as well. And I think this emphasizes the need for an inclusive approach to regional autonomy, obviously.
Then the reluctance to fully embrace Punjabi nationalism also reflects Pakistan's broader tension between regional identities and a singular national narrative. The fear is that allowing Punjabi, a province already perceived as dominant, to assert its cultural and linguistic identity might exacerbate interprovincial tensions.
But this fear is somewhat misplaced because celebrating Punjabi identity or, really any identity, regional ethnic identity, doesn't have to come at the expense of unity. In fact, embracing all of Pakistan's regional cultures, including Punjab's, yes, it has its own, you know,
Mhm.
culture, can create a more inclusive national identity. And just to add, like, Punjab's culture is like still separate from the dominant culture of the center, right? Like
Yeah,
Punjab has such a rich,
different culture. I mean, like you just see the banning of Basant. Why would you ban Basant?
yeah.
It's such a core part of like Punjabi identity or Punjab, like Punjab itself. Like, what is Basant? It's just it's just to welcome spring, and that is exactly how beautiful the cultures are. They have a festival to.
Really not as beautiful as people getting the heads cut off.
I mean, that is a very low like a very loose reason to
It
like
is.
ban
It's
something.
fear
You
mongering.
can ban the threads, like the threads that they
Yeah,
use.
the glass wale,
The
right?
glass, I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, that's you should just ban them. Like, you don't have to ban the
People fly
romantic people.
kites in North America and they just don't do it safely.
Yeah, I mean, and of course, like there's also this like Hawaii firing. Like, why don't you ban Hawaii firing then? Like, people die from that too.
Yeah.
Like every new year, someone comes out like does Hawaii fire, and then it's like some people just dead just because like someone was enjoying New Year's Eve. Like isn't that something that's horrible and that's killing people? Then just like a manja that is like cutting people's head off.
Oh,
I don't know.
God. Yeah. No, it's very true. I know it's kind of like, why are you trying to take away this one piece of joy from everybody?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I mean, in terms of this, like, India mein abhi tak, people have kite flying.
Yeah.
And, India has also successfully promoted regional languages alongside Hindi as part of its federal structure, actually.
The path forward lies in recognizing that Punjab's dominance doesn't negate the need for cultural preservation.
Does it? Does the path forward pivot?
It is the path forward. If anything, Punjabi nationalism, when rooted in the province's rich literary and historical traditions, can serve as a bridge between Pakistan's past and its future, a way to honor diversity while fostering unity.
And ultimately, nationalism doesn't mean erasing differences. It's about finding strength in diversity and ensuring that every voice, whether Punjabi, Sindhi, Baloch, or Pashtun, feels heard. And not advocating for nationalism, obviously, but just, the demonization of nationalism as this one unity idea. Like,
Yeah.
yes, that is true. Pakistani nationalism is its own thing. But if you look at Sindhi and, Baloch nationalism, like, and Pashtun nationalism, these communities that are not at the forefront, that are not part of the center,
Mhm.
they're just trying to assert their autonomy and to have equal rights. So,
And it's not even about, I mean, yeah, we have said these main languages, but there are also like other languages like Broi, like Dhartki,
yeah.
like Marwari, like, people who speak in Gilgit Baltistan and
Potohari,
Potohari,
yeah,
like, and
Haria, yeah,
Seraiki as well.
Hindko,
Hindko, exactly. So, I mean, these are some of the languages,
Dari भी बोलते हैं.
Dari, exactly. Yeah, so some of these languages have been like totally like sidelined, basically, like, and And there are other so many languages that are not sort of given any limelight in
I
Pakistan.
mean, Saraiki is, considered a main language, but
Yeah.
still not given the importance.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and yeah.
So the interplay between nationalism and Pakistan's rivalry with India further complicates matters. While India's nationalism increasingly erases its Islamic history, Pakistan anchors its identity in Islam, often neglecting internal diversity. Well, yeah, I would add here that yeah, India's nationalism comes from erasing or negating what is Islam, and Pakistan's identity comes from, negating Hindu identity. Anything related to Hindu nationalism or Hindu names or Hindu whatever. Not recognizing people like, Bhagat Singh, although Bhagat Singh was from Lahore.
Wow, yeah.
Not giving any limelight on Sir Gangaram.
Right.
Gangaram was the person who built Lahore. This is a famous, like, Manto's writing was like, Hindu मुसलमानों के झगड़े हो रहे हैं, and like, उसमें मुसलमान जो है वो क्या कहते हैं, वो लड़ रहे हैं और मुसलमान के साथ कुछ होता है, तो वो मुसलमान को कहाँ लेके जाते हैं, and वो गंगाराम हॉस्पिटल लेके जाते हैं. So like, it's a very, you cannot, if you start doing this, if you start twisting or like, like playing with history, it's nothing more than just like, fabrication basically, and you're just like, you're not gonna bring out any authenticity in people. Like, you're just like depriving them of their history basically. And I think that because of these, I mean, even me, because of these like podcasts and just like new age media, that's where people are starting to learn these things.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, yeah, this dichotomy, it reveals a fundamental issue, which is nationalism should not be defined by opposition, but by inclusion. If nationalism is to exist, I mean, as Samanursi, I think it was Samanursi said, India and Pakistan are essentially Siamese twins
So
who were separated at birth. And recognizing and valuing internal diversity is key to building a more cohesive society, of course.
nationalism is just not a political ideology, it's a reflection of people's struggles, aspirations, and identities. Whether it's the farmer in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa or the teacher in Balochistan, their stories are integral to national fabric.
And while, in some cases, globalization and internationalism are important, local identities and aspirations must be acknowledged first. Ignoring them only deepens divides.
Leaders like Bacha Khan remind us that nationalism is most effective when it fosters belonging and agency, not exclusion.
We'd love to hear your thoughts. What does nationalism mean to you? How can Pakistan move forward toward a more inclusive future?
And please reach out to us on YouTube, comments, or share this episode with someone who might enjoy it.
Thanks for tuning in to Armpit Intellectual.
Until next time, take care and keep thinking critically.